Welcome friends to another r/malicious compliance video. Our first story of the day is by Ashen11, written up for not following work schedule. I comply to the fullest. Our workplace follows a bi-weekly work schedule. I am one of 3 cooks that work. I usually work 4 to 5 days a week, interchanging Friday and Saturday 11-hour closing shift and Tuesday and Thursday 6-hour closing with Bob. As Friday and Saturday are the most busiest and we close at 11 p.m. instead of 10 p.m. as most days. With agreement from our boss, we would switch every schedule. This schedule would be sent in text and a physical copy at work. Bob was scheduled to work this time as I gave notice a month ahead for those days off. Boss likes to copy and paste schedules, screws up by posting the physical copy stating I'm supposed to work, and text copy as my days off. First week of missing in action following the physical copy, she calls me that day saying that I'm 30 minutes late and asking where am I. Confused, I explain the situation that I have my day off and I can't come in. She interjects saying I was scheduled to work and that I'll be getting a warning for a no-show. The next day, I get a call from boss about my no-show. He doesn't care that the schedule was wrong and not matching. Tells me if I miss today, I'll be written up in that you must follow the schedule at work. He can't schedule anybody else as nobody wants extra shifts besides me/Bob/Cook3 and can't hire anyone as not enough business. Next month rolls around. Bob's quitting and has already given his 2-week notice. The new schedule shows up and I noticed the schedules don't match. Bob was assigned to work Friday and Saturday when he already had quit by then. So after closing Thursday night, I muted my phone from work and I head home to have a few drinks and a J. Come back to work Sunday and boss is waiting. Goes at me for missing work and how he had to fill in for me as nobody else could. I just told him I was only following the work schedule exactly. Oh man, he was furious. But after calming down, he 180'd, as he had no one the next week to cover those days. I just said I couldn't work those days as I get back to work just as the lunch rush comes. What makes my malicious compliance even better is, next week comes, I'm at my mom's work friend's party. I see my boss's wife there also. I meet her and have a short convo that led to asking her where boss was. She said, he couldn't make it as he needed to cover some shifts at work. I replied, too bad. He probably should have scheduled someone. If you were working at a place that you knew was short-staffed to the point that they can't even afford to fire you, would you try and use that a little bit to your advantage here and there? Maybe if you come in late a few times or something like that, you know you're not really going to get in trouble for it because they can't afford to lose you. Let me know in the comments down below. Our next story is by Magic Duck. Boss makes me rush my work, so I have other plans. I used to work for a holiday company a few years ago. Alright company, but the management team I was working for left something to be desired. I worked in entertainment, but in a technical role. Essentially, I was in charge of lighting and sound for a mid-size, up to 2,000 people, venue. Most of the year it was a one-person job, with a few bits of help from the other entertainment staff. But there was one point in the year that was really challenging. The company I worked with produced 3 finale event weekends, where competitions that were run over the course of the year on the multiple sites would have their grand finals, a big celebration, etc., and were generally a great excuse for us to have a few drinks after a lot of chaos. The usual routine was that a few staff from other sites would come to us, help with the prep, and run the weekend with us. I would normally get a couple of people to help me set up the tech that was coming in, as the budgets were huge and the demands were ridiculous. This particular year, my manager took a leave of absence and I was left with the assistant manager. He was, for want of a better phrase, lacking in the management department and was desperately trying to prove himself to be either the boss or manly. Personally, I think that it was because his job was singing and dancing, he took every chance he could to show he was a man. Most dancers I know don't do this, but he was a special case. Now my job was the closest thing to manly in the department. Think rigging, lifting things, technically heavy, etc. so I was a target of his quite a few times. Anyway, just before this all kicks off, he tells me that he's not giving me anyone to help me this year's setup. Not much I can do about this, so I realize I've basically got the work of 3 people to do within a week, with no room for error. So I spent about 20 minutes in our shared office working out a schedule for myself so that I had enough time to do everything. It meant that I was working stupid hours, but it left me with time for food breaks, etc., and I was young, so I thought, who cares? Now, if you've ever done any kind of theater or events work, you'll know that one of the toughest things to do is find time to work on stage while people want to rehearse. I'd even factored this in, but this meant that I was taking breaks while the cast was rehearsing. I'd worked out my schedule with the choreographers in mind so that every day, bar one, I would take my breaks differently to the dancers so I could work on stage when they weren't there. That one day I was taking my break at the same time was Wednesday. So Wednesday comes and I'm well ahead of schedule. My assistant manager walks up to me and lets me know that he thinks I'm behind. I explain that I'm not. In fact, I'm far ahead and things were going well. He disagrees and tells me that he needs me to work through my dinner break on stage and that I would get some time later when he and the dancers were rehearsing. He wanted me to do something about lighting, I think, but with the majority of the equipment I had hired not coming till the next day, it was pointless me doing anything that break. I tried to explain that I had plans, etc. for my break, but it didn't matter. He put his foot down and was adamant I worked as long as I could. When I brought up the whole not having a break in 6 hours thing, he claimed that he would give me a break when the dancers returned in an hour or so. But until they started rehearsing, I was to continue working. I was young and slightly intimidated, so I felt I didn't have a choice. So, reluctantly, I agreed. I was mad as heck, tired and hungry, and had been working my butt off to get this event ready on my own. I set myself up doing pyro instead, as it was a job I was going to do Friday as the last job, and it wasn't what he asked me to do, so it was a little passive-aggressive victory for me. I watched the clock as his and the dancers' 1-hour break turned into a 2.5-hour break. I'd done my work. It's amazing how motivated you can be when you're angry, and was waiting for them to arrive. I was about to head out for food myself when he saunters in and asks where I'm going. When I tell him that I'm done with the jobs I can do on stage and I'm getting food, he stopped me and demanded that I stay for his rehearsal to operate the music for him. I was furious, tired, annoyed, and frankly lost for words. I walked out, got some food, took 20 minutes for myself, and came back to a bollocking from him. Words cannot describe how useless this guy was. Anyway, flash forward to the Friday and my act of malicious compliance. I completed my work early on Thursday, and so was ready to go. I was already ahead, and my extra time on Wednesday really helped. He had insisted that I was there at 9 a.m. that day ready to go, and I was. So I sat in the office for a while, grabbed a snack or two, and waited for someone else to come in. No one else did for another hour. He'd given the rest of the department an extra lie-in, but not told me. Fine, not an issue. He eventually wanders in, asks what I'm up to, and I give him a vague answer. And here is where the malicious compliance comes in. He insisted that I stay around all day to get ready for the opening evening. I wasn't allowed to leave site, and he expected me to either be working on the events or in the office. When I asked about when I can have lunch, so I can plan my time, he told me he would tell me when and if all the work was done. The head of entertainment and the head of business were coming around that afternoon, so we wanted to make a good impression. I didn't comment but made a plan. After doing my general safety checks and after making sure everything was working as it should be, a grand total of 30 minutes work, I sat in my office chair, grabbed his newspaper, and read it over and over. I purposely sat in my chair doing sod all. He didn't specify what I was meant to be doing in the office, so I took it as a time to relax and watch a bit of Sky TV. He doesn't notice me for about 3 hours as he's running around trying to do his job and the bits he forgot. That was until he heard the management team were on their way. He comes over asking what I'm up to. I tell him that I'm doing as he asked me to, stay in the office. He told me to get the venue ready or be in the office, so that's what I'm doing. Starting to panic, he told me to go and do something for the events, to essentially look busy. It went something like this. Have you done the lights? I say, yep. What about? I say, I've got nothing to do. Really, nothing. I've been ahead of schedule all week. But how? I say, remember that evening you told me to work when I didn't need to? Well, the work I was going to do now, I did then. So I have nothing to do now. Bob, head of entertainment, not real name, is on their way down now, so you need to make sure you're doing something. I say, okay, will do. I put his paper down and start neatening my desk and filling out my timesheet. You know, that kind of busy work where you look like you're doing something. But moments later, I was back watching TV. If he wants me to be in the office doing something, I will do. He didn't specify what. A few minutes later, the head of entertainment walks through the door. Seeing me watching TV, he asks me what I'm doing. I fill him in on the situation with me being ahead of schedule earlier in the week, being ordered by assistant manager to work extra time on the Wednesday, and working nearly 10 hours straight by the order of the assistant manager without an authorized break. I fill him in on the assistant manager's antics overall, and I tell him that this put me well ahead of schedule, and that today, the assistant manager called me in earlier than everyone else and told me to be out there getting things ready or to be in the office. I wasn't allowed to leave the office and had nothing left to do, so I was waiting for instruction, essentially being on call for the assistant manager if he found me any extra work to do. I pointed out that at that point, the hours that I'd worked that week, and that as I was effectively on call for the assistant manager, I was recording each and every one of the hours I was sitting in the office that morning as work, pushing at least 80 predicted hours for that week and rising if he kept me there till the end of the day without a break. As one of the slightly better paid members of staff there, it was costing the company a fair bit just to have me sit there and watch TV. Bob was annoyed. Really annoyed. Annoyed that the assistant manager had broken various employment laws, forced me to work extra time, and had me effectively now being paid to sit in the office and do nothing because the assistant manager couldn't manage his team right. He smiled at me and thanked me for my hard work and told me to grab a long lunch while he chatted with the assistant manager. The assistant manager huffed and puffed and was clearly in a foul mood, but ignored me for the rest of the weekend. Thank God. Turns out he basically had his butt handed to him about the legality of what he had done, how I could theoretically have grounds to sue the company, and how he needed to treat his staff better without costing the company a fortune in hours. I must have done something right, as a few months later the assistant manager tried to threaten to leave the company if I wasn't transferred to another site. He was told to quit. Meanwhile, I got a few cushy jobs and a nice manager afterwards. The assistant manager goes and does all that and is just a fill-in for another guy altogether, and then is just suggested that they quit? I don't know if the higher-ups are trying to save face somehow by not having to fire the guy, but I really feel like with the level of incompetency and mismanagement that this guy showed, he probably should have been fired quite a while ago. Maybe it was his status as being a dancer and the assistant manager that got him through some of the stickier situations and blatantly bad errors he was making for the company. All I know, if I was OP and I saw that all go down, I'd probably be feeling pretty darn smug looking back at it. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So, until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.